Big contrast from tonight and last Sunday night. We could plan something every Sunday night. Maybe it'd be a little different. But glad to see each of you. What did I preach on last Sunday night? Young, rich, ruler, one that came to Jesus. What must I do to have eternal life? Now I want to reverse that. I want to talk about old, poor, widow. Mark chapter 12. We see Jesus noticing poor widow that gave out of her want, while the others gave out of their abundance. So what is this story all about? Isn't it about character? How does a person get character? Now, I'm not talking about the idea of calling someone you're a character. That's talking about an individual who stirs things up, who laughs, who is mischievous a little bit. You're a character. No, character. That strength of person. What makes a person keep his word. What makes a person keep his vow, his commitment in marriage, in taking loans. Well, where does a person get that? I hope that parents, and maybe even grandparents, when they have their grandchildren in tow, can help instill in their young minds and hearts what it means to be honest, what it means to forgive, what it means to love life. We look at our children today, there's much sadness, much uneducated children in scriptures. The closing of chapter 12 of Mark, we have two warnings. Now, we use the story this morning of a warning about the ending of the world, about facing judgment. The young man who needed to learn, just like us. In verse 38 through 40, we see Jesus dealing with the scribes and the Pharisees, but mainly pointing fingers at the scribes and talking about wrongful pride. I had a young deacon at a congregation later on in years talk about the sin of pride. And he said, everywhere you look, there's pride. Wrong kind of pride. Pride that goes before a fall, Solomon said. And there in verse 38, Jesus says, beware of the scribes and their teaching. In verse 40, it gives us the reason why they must beware. Watch out. Not only about their teaching, but their actions, because it says they are quick to devour widows' houses. Some kind of scheme, some kind of, you're not giving enough. Make a pledge, give more. That's not enough, give more. And these little widows who have big hearts, generous hearts, fork it over. And all of a sudden they have nothing. I believe that's one of the reasons why Jesus now will talk about this poor widow. in verse 41 through 44, which comes of our lesson tonight, a warning against the pride of being rich. And we talked about that last Sunday night. Remember I told you about the two Carls who argued who grew up the poorest. One, Carl Daniels said we didn't have any kerosene to put on our legs to keep the chiggers from coming and attacking us. And the other one said, well, I didn't have 2 coins to rub together. That's poor. But you and I, we don't know what poor is. We'll look a little bit about that. Here's Jesus in verse 41. He sat over against the treasury. I couldn't find all the information I wanted. Maybe it will come. But supposedly here in the women's court of the temple, there was the Gentiles' court, the inner court of the women, and then even deeper in where the men met. Yet, it seems like here's Jesus observing the men, the women, and there's 13 chests dotting around in the area along the walls so that people could drop in their gift to God, their tithing. And it says, and he was beholding the people who cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there was a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and said unto them, verily I say unto you, that this poor widow has cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury, for all they did cast of their abundance. But she of her want cast all that she had, even all her living. Doesn't that stand out in your mind? All her living, everything that her life depended on, buying food the next day. Was she going to starve? We'll talk more about that. But Jesus is critical, not of the woman, but of those that gave out of their abundance. I'm not sure how much 2 mites was. I've been told about 75 cents. I know the value of exchange in different nations. When I first began mission work, I went to Haiti. And I learned what it meant to change dollars into their currency. And I was so proud of myself. I had my phone and I had the exchange rate on my phone. And I went to the place to give dollars to get, and I forget what they're called on that island. But I didn't know the language. And so the individual understood the difficulty, but I was prepared. And I wasn't going to let him cheat me. And I showed him this much right here. And he shook his head, and I was able to count it. What I'm saying is, all over the world, a penny is something many people pick up. We were at our garage yesterday dealing with some of the leftovers from not moving in the garage, and we was going through things we wanted to discard and something to keep, and I found a little box. The little box was of my wife's, and in it I found 2 quarters, a nickel, a dime, and a penny. And I was teasing Megan, our daughter, Here, man, you can have the penny. She said, keep that penny. Who stops nowadays to pick up a penny? I do. 100 times, what do you have? Maybe not enough for a Coke, maybe not even for a cup of coffee, but penny's a penny. I see value in it. Have you seen people come out of a store and they look at their hand and they just throw the change on the ground as if that's not worth keeping? Some places in the world, they be fighting over those coins. Jesus in Matthew 6 talks about the rich. Turn with me to Matthew 6. Let's read verses 1 through 4. Take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise, you have not reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when you do your alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when you do give your alms, let not your left hand know what thy right hand does. I always thought it's kind of funny. Right hand, left hand. They're not far apart. Can't this right hand see what the left hand's doing? Aren't they both connected to the same mind? What's he talking about? Talking about secrecy. Give in private. Verse 4, that thine alms may be in secret. Thy Father which sees in secret himself shall reward thee openly. And when you pray, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they can be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have the reward. How many times we saw that word, that phrase? They have that word, their reward. They have the reward. Don't we sometimes judge individuals and say, well, I don't like what they're doing. They will get theirs. We're not God. We're not Jesus. And how many times? Underline it. Verse 1, seen of men. Verse 5, seen of men. Why are you here? Why we do anything? I think there's some men who have a position, some men who have a title, some have a responsibility. And out of that, they go through the motions of doing their duty, but maybe their heart is not in it any longer. How about our Christian walk? Is our heart in our service? We don't serve men. We're here to serve God. And we go forth to serve men, to help them see the glory of God. Yes, they made their big productions of their giving. Did Jesus see the hypocritical actions of those rich? And all of a sudden his focus is on this little widow. Is she got a cane? Is she barely getting over there? I don't know. I can draw that picture for myself. She gave a lot. Turn to Matthew 23. And I think we're going to be seeing a pattern here. Matthew 23, verse 5. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. These are the, not uniforms, but the robes that's required. You go to Leviticus and you see God's design of the tabernacle, and it's not drab. It's rich. It's beautiful. There's a reason. Look at the temple. You see from afar, looking into Jerusalem. Chris was telling me, it's not flat. It's a bunch of mountains. And they could see the glow of the temple because of the gold. And their pride in that building. Why was Christianity so hard to start? And men giving up their generations of law of Moses? Their pride. There's more to it. Read it. As we are giving unto the Lord's treasury. You know, there's a lot of discussion about how churches are to use the money given to it, to God, in doing good, and providing Bibles, and preaching the Word, the radio, the printed page, the internet. It takes money. I think sometimes we forget that the treasury is no longer our money. It's God's money. Don't be stingy. Use it for what it's been given for. I wonder, do we really understand the true meaning of this term, out of the land of plenty? You know, from this account, let's make some observations about this selfless individual, about our attitude of heart. Well, we think about the word poor. I don't say the word poor right. I'm West Texan, and I was corrected several times at Brown Trail School of Preaching. You don't say it that way, Gregg. And they tell me how to say it, and I try to say it, and it wouldn't come out the way they said it. So I hope you understand I'm talking about P-O-O-R, poor. It's described as beggarly, living on alms, crouching or cringing in the manner of beggars. I see someone who could barely look up and see you eye to eye. They're ashamed. They're embarrassed. True poor people. And while some regard ourselves as poor relative to others who have plenty or more than we do, we don't know what being poor is. But what did this widow give? Verse 44, it says, she gave all that she had, even all her living. Any of us at any time probably can make a donation to some good cause in our community. Someone's having a benefit. Someone on the internet has brought up what's that program to give to the, and thousands of dollars are coming in all over the United States. Her action indicates that she is a believer. A believer of what? A believer in the providence of God. Here she's given everything. What causes her to do that? Save back a little bit for an emergency. No, that's not what she did. She gave her entire amount. You know what I call that? I call that trust. Philippians chapter 4, verse 19, it says, "My God will supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Jesus Christ." I think that's her trumpet verse. That's her go-to verse. My God's going to provide. I can give this. Or you go to Psalms 37, verse 25, and David says, "I once was young, now I'm old. And yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken by God to beg food." Remember that verse, Psalms 37, verse 25. When you're challenged, when you have an opportunity, well, let's ask, how did she give? I'm not saying, how did she drop it in? I don't think it was like, "Everybody watch, here, I'm dropping it in." You know, looking here at how Jesus observed, I've done the same thing in Africa. They have a basket and they have a covering. And when you give, your hand is clasped and you put your hand under the covering and you drop your gift. It doesn't amount to much. I don't know. I hope not that someone fakes it and doesn't give anything at all. I had a young man one time ask me, "Greg, I can't give anything. I'm embarrassed." I said, "There's more ways to give than dropping coins or a check or dollar bills or whatever in a basket. Learn to give with your time, your talent. Be here to open up. Turn the lights on. Make sure the electricity, the air conditioning on. All these little details you can be doing. Sweep the foyer. Sweep the front porch. That carpet we come in, that rug that where you wipe your feet on before you come through the doors, always needing a little extra sweeping. You know? Well, number one, she thought of the Lord's will. She first gave her own self to the Lord. You see, nothing's going to come out of my pocket until I give my whole life to Him. We're going to look at several verses from 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9. Look at chapter 8, verse 5. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 5. "And this they did not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord and unto us by the will of God." I like what it says in the last part of verse 3. They were willing of themselves. They weren't coerced. They weren't manipulated. They weren't beat over the brow and made to feel guilty because they wasn't given. No, there was a need, and they first gave of themselves. That's what this widow did. Number two, she gave out of a willing mind. You see, a volunteer is one who's willing to step up and say, "I'll do it." Whether it's publicly or privately. Look at chapter 8, verse 12. "For if there be first a willing mind, it is accepted according to that which a man has, not according to what he has not." If God ever asks you to give something you don't have, He knows what you have, doesn't He? She gave as she purposed in her heart. Look at chapter 9, verse 7. "Every man according as he purposed in his heart." You see, Sunday morning, at the last second, you don't dig in your purse, you don't reach in your billfold. I got $10. I'll give that. It's through one's budgeting, his income, planning. How much do I want to give? not how much can I give. How much do I want to give? And brethren, let's be honest. If a congregation is not using the money in the treasury to help someone, where's the zeal? Where's the energy? I know a congregation that loved to save money. One congregation was known to have over, and I'm not talking about this congregation, they had over $100,000 in their bank account. And anytime someone came and asked, I have a problem, they put them through the nth degree and wouldn't give. Give them a dime. And you know what, people? The members stopped giving because they knew what was the use. God wasn't getting any glory from it. People wasn't being served. You purpose in your heart and you give cheerfully, not grudgingly or of necessity. Oh, there's needs. There's not a need. Maybe we need to make a need. Oh, I got some exciting news. There's a new ministry starting up at Talawanda for young women who sold themselves to stay alive. And this is a program that's going to bring these women to a place to teach them how to sew or make something to sell, so they don't have to sell their body, but they can sell something they produced. Pray for that. Yes, she gave out of her poverty, out of her deficiency, while others gave out of their excess. Don't we ask the question, why? Why did this woman give? Because of her attitude of self-denial. Because she loved the Lord first. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 5. First gave their own selves to the Lord. There's the key. Have we given ourselves to the Lord? She was a selfless person. That doesn't mean she didn't value her life. She didn't cut herself down. She didn't say, I'm worthless. She didn't calculate her resources to determine whether or not she was able to afford the gift. She's just grateful for Father's blessings. This is true of all sacrificial giving. Gift of this poor widow was greater than all that had cash money into the treasury. Verse 41. Because she gave a proportion to her ability. She voluntarily did that. Where the young rich ruler was commanded. All that you have, sell it, and give it to the poor. She's not forced. When is the time to learn how to be benevolent? Our children need to learn. This should be every Christian man and woman's duty to observe not how much to give, but how much compared with what she has. Where's the motive behind it? You look at 2 Corinthians 8 and chapter 9. You'll see what sacrificial giving is. They were blessed for it. Character. Remember we talked about that? 3 questions you can ask to see what a person really is all about. What makes him laugh? What makes him angry? And what makes him cry? Moses, through the tablets, We saw the people making merry, falling into idolatry and adultery. And then what did he do? He went back up on the mountain and pled for the people. Lord, may I suffer in their place. I think of Jesus, who cleansed the temple. And then what did he do? He looked over Jerusalem and he wept. It's easy to get angry, especially at someone else's sins. But it's not easy to look at sin, our own included, and weep over it. Young rich ruler, the old widow who gave so much. Thank you, Jesus, for bringing her out for our admonition and our learning. I pray that each of us have learned something that we will change if needed. If not, keep doing what you're doing. If you need Jesus for any reason, to repent, I believe everyone in here is a member of the church. Lord willing, if you have any need, come while we stand, while we sing.